You're locked on to the SABC News Channel. Thank you for joining us this Saturday afternoon. Well, the 2018-19 State of Urban Safety in South Africa report, this is done by the South African Cities Network, has once again thrown sharp focus on crime-fighting measures in South Africa. The report is a collation of data from sources like the South African Police Service and Stats SA to look at the state of crime, violence and safety in the country's 9 metros. Well, this report finds Cape Town as the city with the highest murder rate in the country. Johannesburg is second at 31 per 100,000 people and Pretoria the lowest at 17. Well, Dr. Chris De Kock is an independent crime analyst. He joins us now from our Pretoria studios. Good afternoon, Doc, and thank you so much for your time on the SABC News Desk.
Good afternoon to you and the listeners.
Chris, this report, some are saying it's an indictment on the SAPS response to crime in the Cape right now, or not. What do you make of it?
Well, I think to understand these different levels of murder in the different metros, one have to look at where murder comes from, what generates murder. You know, there are many factors that generate murder. Unfortunately, the police in the whole country are just registering a murder. If they have a body, they will register a murder. What we should know is this murder a result of gang violence? Is it a result of taxi violence? Is it a result of robbery? Or is it a result of domestic violence or homophobic murders or xenophobic murders, and there's a whole range of other factors. Now, if you look at Cape Town unfortunately have quite a lot of these factors. In Cape Town, you have real gang warfare. So the gangs and the infighting between the gangs are contributing to the murder figure. In some areas of the Cape Town, the Cape Flats, you have another dynamic. In Khayelitsha, for example, I have found in the past that up to a third of the murders in Khayelitsha is as a result of robbery, street robbery, public robbery, especially at your taxi ranks, on your way home, and those kind of things. And then about a third of the murders is a reaction on those murders. So it is vigilante murders. So you find very high levels of vigilante murders in a place like Khayelitsha and Nyanga. And then a third of the murders will be what we call domestic violence, where intimate partners fight each other. So you have to understand the dynamics of each of these areas. And maybe I can just add this and say in Pretoria, the reason why in Pretoria or Tshwane, why in Tshwane it's the lowest, is that you don't have the gang factor maybe. You don't have the vigilante factor so much. You have more of robbery and you have more of domestic violence.
All right, Chris, before we get into the gender-based violence aspect of it, because it sounds like a multi-layered, multifaceted problem with just not one reason behind what's happening. We've heard more and more robust calls for the SANDF to be called in to areas like the Cape Flats. But will rolling in the army fundamentally address the problems that cause crime in the targeted areas?
No, it will definitely not address the causes. The root causes for gangs is much deeper and historically go further away. And the root causes is a whole fight for territory where you can sell your contraband, especially drugs, where they can control the community. So you can bring in the defense force. The defense force may put some damper on the violence itself, but I am against the deployment of the army or the defense force in a situation like that. Point number one, they are not trained for that type of thing. They are not trained as police officers. There's some special units in the police. I mean, there's now the anti-gang unit in the Western Cape, in some areas, the gang areas. They are trained for that kind of situation. The army or the defense force are not trained for that. Secondly, the moment you bring in a defense force into any area, it creates the image of you have lost total control of the situation, that you have sort of martial law in that area. I don't think it's a good thing for South Africa to have areas which have to be controlled by the Defence Force. The police will just have to do their job. And the police will just have to cope with this.
All right, Doctor, how effective are the anti-gang units we saw roll out quite in recent months in the Cape right now? Because since their inception, we've still seen more than 1,000 deaths or gang-related deaths at that. What should be done to improve their efficiency or effectiveness at this juncture?
The other day there was a media report that the Minister Cele, actually say that since their inception in the Western Cape, the gang violence have gone down quite substantially. And then there was reaction of the community and some community leaders who said, no, they are not doing enough. Now, I'm not 100% sure, you see, which of these two viewpoints is actually the truth. But it seems that, according to all the indications, that the violence, that gang violence at least, not other kinds of murders, but gang violence at least, have diminished or decreased with the deployment of the gang units. I think the main thing that they should concentrate on is intelligence. In this kind of situation, your intelligence is of very, very, very high importance. Also, they should start to look at prevention of gangs. How did in big cities in the United States, in New York, in Chicago, in many of those big cities in the United States, in those ghettos, how did the community control gangs? I mean, there's a lot of things that I can think of where you identify gang members, where you talk to gang members, and you warn them that if they continue with their activities, certain measures will have to be taken to prevent further gang violence. So we must go and learn where there are gangs in the world. What have they done there?
What's also very concerning coming out of this report is the number of women and children killed alone in the last year. That's 2,930 women and 985 children. Now, although we have a government that's adopted a zero-tolerance approach to such crimes, it's starting to feel like we're facing an epidemic of violence against women and children. Why are crimes of this nature so persistent? What are the barriers to prosecution that we just can't seem to get over at this point?
You see, when it comes to this is a very domestic type of violence. I mean, the reasons for this can be anything from drug abuse to alcohol abuse, conflict about sexual relationships, illegitimate sexual relations. There can be a whole range. Jealousy play a major role when it comes to domestic violence. Male dominance is a major factor. We unfortunately have a culture of male dominance in South Africa, especially in certain regions. And wherever you have male dominance, whenever the woman disagree with the male, there will be a fight, and that fight will boil over into violence, especially if alcohol is involved. Now, it's very difficult for the police as an organization to address this problem. This problem has to be addressed through the whole issue of culture, of moral regeneration. And I think also by addressing the whole patriarchal structure of society.
Chris, we are running out of time, so very quickly. Some quarters, of course, are slumming the police minister, Cele, in the light of this report. Now, I read a recent article in which you wrote, in which you worked out the annual percentage increases and decreases for for certain crimes, and we saw decline in the 9 policeable crimes. During the era of Bheki Cele as commissioner, actually all 9 policeable crimes, all right, that was heist, carjackings, truck hijackings, street, house robberies, murder and attempted murder, and car theft, we saw them all fall. So he did get it right during his tenure as commissioner. He actually did better than the Celebi and Piega era. How did he get it right then?
Well, then he was the commissioner, now he's the minister. You see, there's quite a big there's quite a big difference between the two. But in that era, what was happening was intelligence-based visible policing. And this week I listened to the Chicago Deputy Chief of Police. I was in a meeting where he spoke, and again, it seems that's a recipe internationally. If you know your crime, you must understand your crime in your station, in your precinct, whatever precinct, and then you base your policing on top of that. Also, the community must become part of your policing. Not that the community must be deployed in the streets, but your community have been brought into the whole strategy of policing. Those are the recipes that they use in for example, in Chicago with great success. And that was half of it we used during the time I was also in the police then. We used in 2010, 2011.
Chris, what specific steps do you think that the SAPS should take right now to improve its crime intelligence division in relation to key crime challenges like murder in this case?
Well, I right at the beginning, I even started to mention one of the most basic things they can do is to start to distinguish murder the moment they register it. You know, when you find a body, when there's a murder, you have a good idea, this is a gang-related one, this is a taxi-related one, this is a robbery, this is a farm murder, this is a domestic murder. And then from there, you must then concentrate on those different kinds of murder, for example. On some of them, you can gather intelligence. On some of them, there is just no hope that you're ever going to gather intelligence. You must also analyze crime. That is part of your intelligence, is analysis. When I listen to these Chicago chiefs, they actually emphasize that it is all about intelligence analysis. And I think that's where the SAPS must start to improve their whole business.
Independent crime analyst there, Dr. Chris De Kock, joining us from our Pretoria studios. Thank you so much for sharing your invaluable insights with us on the SABC News Desk.